That we have both done an online video and in-class activities about what the separation of powers are and what the checks and balances are and how each part of the federal government, the three parts, have their own powers, we're going to look closer at each branch separately. First up, we have the legislative branch, which is actually the first articles of the Confederation, even before the presidency. So even within the legislative branch, there's two separate houses. We have the House of Representatives and we have the Senate. Although they are both based on representation of a singular state, they're kind of different. So first off, the House of Representatives are people that are elected to 2-year terms by members of a district, and districts are divided up throughout the state. We also have the Senate, which is elected to 6-year terms, which is 2 per state, no matter of size, population, or anything. So the House of Representatives, the idea is that there's more overturn because there needs to be more voice being heard for every single state and every single district, specifically for the constituents. For the Senate, there's supposed to be more stability. This means you have 6-year terms, they have bigger goals, and because they have these bigger goals, they need more time to enact them. And Senate's designed to be a little more stable and deliberate. But the House of Representatives, they go in, they get their stuff done, and they have to be more listening to the constituents in order to be reelected and to continue their ideas forward. As we discussed, the idea of the separation of powers, and even more the separate powers within Congress, came from the fear of having too big and too strong of a certain aspect of Congress, or just the government itself. So the Founding Fathers created a system that they hoped it wouldn't happen, and so far it's been pretty effective. So what federalism actually is a sharing of constitutional powers between a central government and state governments. And that means that, yes, there are powers that are represented strictly by those people in Washington, D.C., but that the states have power themselves. That means that the federal government just can't override the states on everything. There's shared powers, there's state powers, and there's national powers. They're all intertwined in a way, but they're also separate too. And there comes in the question of express powers, which is personally expressed through the writings of the Constitution, and implied, which comes from the necessary and proper clause, meaning that there are assumptions made that these should be implied to the states. So this really comes down to the connection between the state and federal governments. And for the most part, there's been a pretty good respect for these powers. So any legislative powers not specifically mentioned or implied are reserved for the states, which means that these are specific to the states and they can act on their own. That's why in different states, there's different speed limits, there's different school codes and stuff like that. There's an overriding federal government laws, but specifically there are a lot of powers reserved to the states, so they can act independently, but also still in respect to the federal government, making the connection there, but also creating a nice separation and independence for your state. So you may be thinking to yourself, what do these congressmen actually do? We understand where they come from and all that they have to, the term length and stuff like that. But as you can see here, this is what we call the legislative process. And really what we're looking at for the Congress to do is to draft and create bills and laws that will really make the constituents, us the people, our lives better. In order to do this, as you can take from a quick glance at our graph here, it is no easy task. First starts out with an idea, and that idea is drafted, and then there's hearings about it, and then there's changes made to it to make sure it goes through, and then from there are arguments or discussions on it, and then it comes between the two houses and they discuss it and they send it in, and then the president has a view. And I can go on and on and on about the specifics, but we're going to save that for class. Really all you need to know is that these bills and these laws are set and they're worked on and they're created by our congressmen to make our lives better. But in order to do that, it needs to be one thing, and that thing is compromise. And that's really what the checks and balances and the separation of powers comes to. It comes from compromise and understanding that there are separated powers, and that is there for a reason. And although it can be a little frustrating at times, especially for our congressmen and ourselves, it really needs to be worked on in order to make sure that there's not one major power, that we have the responsibility to understand that we need to compromise, work together for the better of our people. This is what our founding fathers came to. So in order for the legislative branch to do this, they need to create these laws and they create these bills in order to pass these laws for us. So to better understand this, we have another crash course. Hope you like it, and we'll talk to you after.
Hi, I'm Craig, and this is Crash Course Government. It's been a dream of mine to be on Crash Course since I was a little kid. Speaking of acting like a little kid, today we're going to talk about the U.S. Congress, which, according to the Constitution, is the most important branch of government. That was probably written by Congress. It wasn't. They didn't exist yet. So when I say that Congress is supposed to be the most important branch of government, I'm talking about the national government, not the state government. There's a difference, okay? I know this because the Constitution, which consists of 7 articles and 28 amendments, mentions Congress first. In fact, right after the preamble, the very first section of the very first article, which is helpfully labeled Article 1, Section 1, says this: "All legislative powers herein granted shall be vested in a Congress of the United States, which shall consist of a Senate and a House of Representatives." So right away, the Constitution sets up a 2-house legislature with a Senate and a House of Representatives. The Latin word for this is bicameral, and I promise I'll quit with the Latin now. I didn't really say much Latin, but just once, but I won't say anymore. That's pretty catchy. So let's start with the House of Representatives because it's a little easier. In order to serve in the House, you have to be 25 years old, a citizen for 7 years, and a resident of the state that you hope to represent. I'd like to think that I represent a state of enjoyment. Vote for me. 2015. Representation is determined by population. No state has fewer than 1. Vermont, North and South Dakota, Wyoming, and Alaska each have 1. And the most populous state, California, has 52. Right now, there are 435 members of the House of Representatives. The Senate has 2 senators from each state for a total of 100. To be a senator, you must be at least 30 years old, a citizen for 9 years, and a resident of the state you hope to represent. Originally, senators were chosen by the state legislatures, which meant that they tended to be politically important members of a state's elite class. But this changed with the 17th Amendment, and now senators are elected by the people, just like representatives. I'm going to explain how the 2 houses of the legislature actually legislate in a later episode. I'll have a bigger beard, probably. But now I'm going to point out a few of the ways that they are different. Ultimately, the houses do the same thing, make laws, but the Constitution grants certain specific powers to each house. Let's look at those powers in the thought bubble. The House of Representatives is given the power to impeach the president and other federal officials. This can be confusing because people tend to think that impeaching means kicking the official out of office, but it doesn't. The House impeaches an official by deciding that that person has done something bad enough to bring him to trial. An impeachment is like a criminal indictment. Once the official is impeached, a trial happens in the Senate. If it's the president who's been impeached, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court presides. Otherwise, it's the vice president. You don't let the VP preside over a presidential impeachment trial because he has a vested interest in seeing the president removed. Then the VP would become president. Duh. The second power that the House has is that they decide presidential elections if no candidate wins a majority of the Electoral College. I'll explain this later, but for now remember that this barely ever has happened ever. The third power that belongs specifically to the House is found in Article 1, Section 7. All bills for raising revenue shall originate in the House of Representatives. This is pretty important because it means that any bill that raises taxes starts in the House. And if you know anything about America, you know that we care about taxes. A lot. So this power is huge, and it's sometimes called the power of the purse. The Senate has some important powers too. The first one I've already mentioned is that they hold impeachment trials. That doesn't happen very often at all. Another power the Senate has is to ratify treaties. This requires a 2/3 vote of the Senate. Most treaties you don't hear much about, except when the Senate refuses to ratify them, as it did, or didn't do, with the Treaty of Versailles. I totally would have ratified that treaty, just saying. The last significant power that belongs only to the Senate is the confirmation power. The Senate votes to confirm the appointment of executive officers that require Senate confirmation. Some of these, like the cabinet secretaries, are obvious, but there are over 1,000 offices requiring Senate confirmation, including federal judges, and this is probably too many. Thanks, Thought Bubble. I love saying that. Yes! So those are the major differences between the 2 houses of the legislature. But why do we have 2, and why did the framers of the Constitution make them different anyway? There are 2 categories of reason here, historical and practical. The historical reason for the 2 houses is that when the Constitution was being written, the framers couldn't agree on what type of legislature to have because they came from states with different interests. Delegates from states with large populations wanted legislators to be chosen based on the state's population so that their states would have, wait for it, more legislators and more power. This is called proportional representation. States with small populations understandably didn't want proportional representation. They favored equal representation in the legislature, which would give them equal power. Large states supported what was called the Virginia Plan, and small states wanted the New Jersey Plan, and they argued over it until a compromise was reached. Since it was brokered by Connecticut's Roger Sherman, it was called the Connecticut Compromise, or more usually, the Great Compromise, because historians are really bad at naming things. Hey, this war is 9 years long. Let's call it the 7 Years' War. That's actually genius. If you guessed that the compromise was an upper house with equal representation and a lower house with proportional representation, congratulations, you understand the Great Compromise. You don't win anything if you guessed it right. Actually, if you guessed it right, click here and watch me punch an eagle. So that's the historical reason for the two houses, but what about the practical reasons? One of the main reasons to divide the legislature and give the two houses different powers is to make it so that the legislature doesn't have too much power. How do we know that the framers wanted this? Because one of them, James Madison, told us in one of the Federalist Papers. In Federalist 51, Madison wrote, "In Republican government, the legislative authority necessarily predominates. The remedy for this inconveniency is to divide the legislature into different branches and to render them, by different modes of election and different principles of action, as little connected with each other as the nature of their common functions and their common dependence on the society will admit." James Madison might not have sounded like Foghorn Leghorn, but that's one of the theories. My theory. I say. Anyway, the idea that one house of the legislature can limit the power of the other house is called an intra-branch check. We'll look at this in more detail when we talk about checks and balances. In general, the framers of the Constitution were kind of obsessed with the idea that the government might have too much power. So we'll be seeing a lot of examples of how they tried to deal with this. So let's finish up by looking at the reasons why the specific powers were given to each house. To do this, let me introduce my assistants, and by assistants, I really mean clones. Let's go to the clone zone! So I made these clones to help us understand these multi-sided issues. This is Senate clone, and this is House clone, and they're quite good looking, I might add.
So you may have noticed, according to the Constitution, senators are expected to be older than representatives. And although 30 isn't all that old today, it was in 1787 when the Constitution was written. This was because older people are wiser, or at least more experienced, and the framers wanted the Senate, which is sometimes called the upper house, to be more serious, august, dignified, and above all, deliberative than the House. It was supposed to be more immune from the desires of the public, which the framers were kind of afraid of because of their unfortunate propensity to riot. One of the ways that the framers hoped to ensure this was by giving senators a 6-year term, which really would mean that they could ignore the rantings and ravings of their constituents for at least, 5 years at a time. Because the Senate is supposed to be the more deliberative body and the one that is more insulated from public opinion, they're the ones given the power to confirm public ministers and to ratify treaties. I guess they thought that, being older and wiser, senators would be better judges of character and better able to govern based on the sense of what is in the public interest. Sometimes the idea that a representative should govern based on what he thinks is best for the people rather than what they say they want is referred to as representative acting as a trustee.
Which is another way of saying that the Senate is full of elitist snobs that don't care what their constituents want at all. In the House, representatives are supposed to take into consideration the desires of the people in their districts who voted for them, acting in the role of delegates. So the main way that the framers tried to ensure that representatives could be more responsive to their voters, other than having them directly elected by the voters instead of state legislatures, was to give them 2-year terms. This meant that they had to be responsive to the changing opinion of voters in their districts, otherwise they could easily be voted out of office. You don't want that. No way. Oh boy. Why they would be given the power of impeachment is sort of beyond me, but it totally makes sense to give the power of the purse to the branch of government that's closest to the people. After all, one thing that the government does that is directly related to almost everybody is taxes. So you want the most democratic body making decisions that have the most direct effect on people. Thanks, clones. So there you have it. That's the basics of our bicameral Congress, including the differences between the two houses and why they are that way. I used Latin again. I'm sorry. Mea culpa. We'll be going into much greater detail about how the two houses work together, or don't, in future episodes. But that's enough for now. Thanks for watching Crash Course. I'll see you next week. Crash Course Government and Politics is produced in association with PBS Digital Studios. Support for Crash Course U.S. Government comes from Vocal. Vocal supports nonprofits that use technology and media to advance social equity. Learn more about their mission and initiatives at vocal.org. Crash Course is made with the help of these nice people. Thanks, nice people, and thanks for watching. You're nice people, I assume.
So I hope you guys enjoyed that video, and it gave you another way to look at Congress and their powers. But for tomorrow, what we're going to need you to understand is really what the Article 4 of the legislative process is. And in order to do that, we are going to bring out something that's pretty current, Twitter actually, so a lot of you should be pretty familiar with it, to go over what each specifically within the article, what were the specifics of it, what powers were given to Congress, and how they are important. So for tomorrow, obviously you've looked at this video, which is a good start, but be prepared to work not only on the articles but also in groups to develop some tweets. So we look forward to tomorrow, and thank you so much for being a part of this. Bye.